And you look back through her CV, I mean, if you think Sussex Royal was up for a little bit of time and then that was asked not to be used by the royal family. Archetypes had one series and then disappeared. The Tig that she's now, not using. Pearl, the show on Netflix, that Netflix didn't want to go ahead with that show, the cartoon show, the animated show. Working member of the royal family, that was something that wasn't successful for Meghan. I mean, there is a long list of failures that Meghan has on her CV.
The podcast on Spotify, that was another failure, So, she's good at failure.
I think that, the bench is another one, but all of this stuff, as long as she gets to something in the end that's really successful, she won't care. Like, she will move on from all of these things. She won't even look back on them. She won't even give them another second's thought. But she needs to find out really quickly whether this is going to be it. And at the moment, it just doesn't feel to me like Jam can live up to the amount of pressure that she's putting on it, because she's tied it to her Netflix show. So the two things will succeed or fail together. So for Meghan, this really is the brand now. And we're living in an age, Martha Stewart is years and years and years ago. We're living in a different world now. She's making, with the Netflix show, she's making something that feels like linear scheduled TV. It feels like an old school, daytime, a bit of good fun, cooking TV, right? And there was a place for that. But is there a market for it on streaming platforms? When people watch TV through streaming platforms, it's a very different experience. You want to sit back, you want to watch a box set, you want to watch 10 episodes in a row. Is there a market for what Meghan's doing in the modern world of streaming? So it's another thing where she needs to find out really quickly whether this is going to work or not, because if it doesn't, it's going to be moving on again to something new, and she's going to have to work out pretty quickly what that's going to be. And every time something doesn't quite land, it's even more pressure on the next thing to be the one that makes her name in America again. And I have to say, I still cannot for the life of me work out why she did not just do a Suits reboot. Acting is what first forged a relationship between Meghan and the American people. Suits has had an absolute wild run recently that nobody saw coming. It's been so successful and loved again. I cannot for the life of me work out why she didn't just do a Suits relaunch.
Well, she said she just doesn't want to go back to being an actress.
It's a crazy
anymore.
decision.
But that was her talent. I mean, I just listed lots of things that have failed, but Suits was reasonably successful.
It was a success. And look, if she barely need to be in it. She could do a few scenes here and there, and that would make the relaunch of the show. So it's madness to me that she didn't just do what she's good at, what she's known for, and it's a quick win, and it would have been fantastic. But for some reason she doesn't want it.
No. Arthur, I mentioned that I thought this was the worst rebrand ever. There's a narrative that still bounces around where there's a suggestion that the royal family were a little bit too quick with Meghan and Harry, and that if they'd taken their time, they could have found a place, given them a bit more leeway, and Meghan and Harry could have been successful in the, back in the royal family. They didn't have to run off. They could have stayed here if the royal family had acted better and found a role for them. Looking at these failures, looking at the rebrand, the mess that she's got into, maybe I'm starting to think that we actually did have a lucky escape.
No, actually, the first year after they were married, they were sensational. I mean, I covered every event they did. The crowds were huge. She embraced it. And Meghan was fantastic. She just embraced it, and she was a huge success. There's no reason with that. And Harry and her were a great team. So they were very, very big, and massive coverage. Every paper, every newsreel covered their events. So it wasn't, as Jack says, if it's a success, he says she gets a success, then it's right. But a lot of businesses fail. A lot of businessmen, start businesses and fail, but they carry on and eventually have a success. Well, perhaps she will, because what she's great is great at presenting herself. Whatever the disaster, you never know it when she's talking about it. It's as though it's just a little thing we've got to deal with. In fact, that somebody could sue her here and sue her there doesn't seem to worry them. They're good at suing themselves.
Now, Arthur, we are hoping to go to Italy in a couple of months' time, because the King will be there and he'll be going to Vatican City, and we would be hoping that he would see the Pope. But Pope Francis is very unwell at the moment. We would hope that if the Pope is still around when we go in April, that the King will meet. But you have met Pope Francis at least once, I believe. We have it up here, actually. We've got you here, and there's the King, or as he was then, Prince Charles in the background.
Prince Charles introduced me to the Pope. He said, "Holy Father, this is Arthur Edwards, and he's been working with me for over 40 years. And the Pope said, pray for me." and shook hands with him. I was absolutely, because I'm a practicing Catholic, so I was really overwhelmed by that, you know, really, and obviously, you know, to be introduced like that by the Prince, it was overwhelming, and it's a great moment in my life. I mean, if sadly if our Pope didn't last till if he died before the King's visit, there would be another Pope. I mean, the King's going to the Holy See, not particularly to meet Pope Francis, but whoever's the Holy Father at the time. So, but if, of course, it's funny, you know, that Prince Charles was getting married to Camilla on the day that the Pope was buried, the last Pope, John Paul II, and Charles had to postpone his wedding a day to go to the funeral to elect Pope Benedict. But this man is a great man, Pope Francis, and I just wish him well. I hope he recovers.
We hope to see him in April.
I would. I'd love to see him again, yeah.
And how many popes have you met, Arthur?
3. But I must tell you a follow-up to that. We went to Rome a couple of months later for an ordination, and on an ordination, the whole of the steps of St. Peter's is covered in priests and cardinals. It's massive, and the Pope is the head of the ceremonies. And then afterwards at the English College, Prince Charles said to me, "I'm sorry I couldn't introduce you to the Pope today, Arthur. He was very busy."
Oh, great. And finally, today's been a little bit, well, I suppose it's not been too depressing. We've been up and down throughout the chat. But I'm quite excited because the King, Queen, Princess Anne and the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester are all out on a job. It's at Buckingham Palace. They've gone for a reception to reward those with humanitarian efforts, or for their humanitarian efforts. I'm excited because we don't often see this amount of royals going to a reception or an event. Do we need to see more of this, guys?
We might see it, but I don't know if they're going to, you know, if we photograph it. The only one time I photographed the Duke of Gloucester was he was riding out of Kensington Palace on his motorbike. And I remember taking the picture back, and the night editor said, "Oh, look, the Duke of Hazard," and put him in the paper. But that was the only time I ever saw a picture of him published. Look, they're cousins of the King, and they're part of the royal family, and I suppose they're there at the trooping, and they're there at Christmas. You know, they're there for the big occasions. And imagine this humanitarian thing. There's a lot of people there, and
some good causes. Some good causes they could do with a little bit of a boost.
Yeah, so, you know, it's better that everybody gets to see someone.